Alright YouTube, so first off I have to apologize for my birds because they have decided that now is the time to start cooing, and there's nothing I can really do about that. Well, there's one thing I could do about that, but I'm not going to because ASPCA would be all over me. Anyway, what we've got today is something that a lot of you have probably seen and considered. This is the Model 1895 revolver. It is the Nagant Revolver, actually, is what it's being advertised as. This specific one is going to be a little bit different from the ones that you'll see in the magazines, and I will explain a little more about that later. But first things first, a little bit of history like I always like to give. These were designed in 1895 by the Belgian gunmaker Leon Nagant and his brother, whose name I do not remember. Basically, the story goes that in 1891, Russia selected Sergei Mosin's design for the Mosin Nagant rifle, but used Leon Nagant's magazine design because his magazine had an interrupter that kept you from dual feeding the rimmed cartridges. So Leon Nagant said, well, why didn't you take all of my design? And the Russians said, well, you know, this, that, and the other thing, and they gave him some excuses, so he threatened to sue. Now, from a modern standpoint, looking back on that, that was something of an empty threat, because there was no world court for him to sue Russia in at that time. And if he had tried to sue Russia in a Belgian court, who cares, really? I mean, you know, Belgium would have possibly gone to war against Russia, Russia would have flattened them, everyone would have ended up losing something, and Russia would have ended with that. Russia would have still had his design and still wouldn't have used it, and Belgium would have just lost a bad war. Anyway, he went to the Russian court and he asked, why did you not use my design? So the Tsar said, alright, we're going to make you a deal. He said, we need a pistol to replace our Type 3, which was a break-action 44 Russian oddity from Smith & Wesson. It was a licensed copy of one of the Smith & Wesson break-action designs. Basically, he said, we need a new revolver. You can design it. Figure out a way to solve this problem of a cylinder gap. Now, if you know revolvers, you know that the cylinder gap really isn't much of a problem. You lose a little bit of gas, but it doesn't really adversely affect you in any way. So this was basically coming up with a complicated solution to a problem that really wasn't much of a problem, fixing what isn't broken, if you will. The solution to that was to have the cylinder cam forward and lock with the barrel as such after you pull back the hammer or pull the trigger. The upside to this is it gives you about 75 feet per second increase in velocity and a tiny little increase in your joules, which is to say the force that is applied by the bullet. The downside obviously being that the trigger pull is 23 pounds in double action and something like, I think, 17 pounds in single action, and if you pull your trigger too lightly in single action, your gun will just decock because it is insanely complicated internally. Also, the mainspring on this thing is a monster, and it is going to hurt like a motherfucker if you let that thing launch out into your face, so don't do that. Basically, the whole idea behind these was give them a robust, simple revolver that can be easily repaired, which incidentally this is not simple in any way, but the repairs are very simple. Basically give them a robust revolver that's going to stand up to the punishment that the Russians are going to deliver to it in the field. And initially they came out with a half-moon front sight, which is basically just a regular crescent. As you can see, my sight is not normal by any means. More on that later. That half moon, the reason they chose a half moon was so that it doesn't catch on the holster and cause undue wear to the holster when it's being pulled out in a hurry. I can't say I fault them for that idea, but at the same time, come on. The half moon was it was near impossible to aim with because it's very difficult to get a point of aim on something that is just rounded at the top. Basically, afterwards, several Russians were complaining about that. So in 1932, which is the year this revolver comes from, the Soviet Revolutionary Weapons Council got together and said, okay, we need to fix this. And they tested several different designs, and they came up with the Half Moon with a notch on the back that you see on all the refurbished models. That became standard after 1932, and yeah, the rest of that is history, as they say. And this was produced until 1945, when it was officially replaced by the TT-33 Tokarev, which was a good thing in my opinion. I love the Tokarev. I have one somewhere around here I will review in the future. All told, this revolver, a lot of people have been asking, is it worth $110? You gotta ask yourself, what do you really want from a revolver? Do you want something that's fun to shoot? Do you want something that's going to be a concealed carry weapon? Because this is never going to be concealed carry. I am sorry, but if you try to use this for that, you're going to be dead. Do you want something that's just going to be, you take it to the shooting range with your kids, you let them shoot it and say, yes, this was used in a World War, 2 smaller conflicts, and possibly a police action? Or are you just going to hang it on your mantelpiece? This is great for the last two. You can hang it on your mantelpiece for $110. I mean, come on, you can't go wrong there. You can show the neighbors and say, look, this gun is older than you are, and this gun could technically be collecting Social Security at this point. But if you're going to take it to the shooting range, don't expect accuracy. Don't expect a pleasant shooting experience. You're going to have some fun with it. It's a lot of fun to shoot these, but it's also a royal pain in the ass, because if you're shooting in double action, you have a 23-pound trigger pull. If you're shooting in single action, you have a 17-pound trigger pull with your trigger capable of activating the decocker. And that's just annoying very, very quickly. Almost as annoying as the goddamn doves in the background. And basically, if you're going to concealed carry this, I can guarantee you're not going to enjoy it, because the trigger pull is too heavy. The revolver reloads far too slowly. It only has 7 shots in it. There are so many guns that are much better than this, so I don't recommend it for any modern purposes other than enjoyment. And that said, for $110, where else are you going to find a revolver from the Second World War or before, or World War I, or 1890s for $110? And it's original. Think about that. Now, this specific revolver, actually, I believe, was used by the Republic of Vietnam. And my reason for saying that is, this does actually have several of the post-war refurbishment stamps, including a tiny little X right there, which you cannot see on the camera. And then, yeah, you still can't really see the other refurbishment mark, but it's right about up here. Anyway, that refurbishment mark up here looks like a K in a circle, kind of. And the whole idea with that one is that was the proof mark that it went back to the arsenal. It got completely reblued. They re-serial numbered they replaced any broken parts, re-serial numbered them to match with the revolver's serial number, and then sent it back into storage for World War III, in preparation for World War III. In this case, this one actually probably got sent to the Republic of Vietnam as war aid from Russia. Now, what most people don't know is that 99% of the war aid that went to Vietnam, or maybe not 99%, I'd say about at least 2/3 of the war aid that went to Vietnam came from China, because China was closer, they had a better relationship with Vietnam, and let's be honest, they were still producing Mosins, and Russia was kind of like, yeah, so why don't you guys go do that? We're gonna give them a few token guns, and then we'll sit back and watch what happens, because Russia thought that Vietnam was going to lose once the U.S. got involved. Basically, my reason for saying that this probably went to Vietnam is the overall state of the gun. If you notice, There is quite a bit of finish loss all over the place. The wood has turned completely black, like jet black. It is semi-rotted on the inside. Got a broken grip strap right about here, which you really can't see, but oh well. Basically, this is consistent with being heavily used, poorly maintained, in a very humid, damp environment. If you know Russia, you know Russia is anything but humid, hot, and damp. Well, in winter it's damp only because it's buried under 16 feet of snow. The whole idea, basically, that I'm basing this theory on is that this was probably some part of war aid that was just handed to Vietnam and said, here, if you win, look us up, but if you don't win, then tell them this was given to you by China so that we don't get in trouble and start World War III. Another thing is this front sight is actually made of iron. It's not made of the same steel as the rest of the gun. It is completely unfinished, and it is made of iron. So that is consistent with several guns that have been found that have been documented as coming out of Vietnam with capture papers, and etc., and have actually had pieces replaced by substandard steel or just pig iron that was created in a pot and melted down and used as a replacement part. So my theory is, somehow, somewhere, the front sight piece got completely broken off. The Viet Cong, being rather ingenious with salvaging parts, made a tiny little just facsimile of a front sight and popped it in there and said, this is good to go. So basically that's my theory on this one. It is not import marked, so that basically leaves you with three options: pick up from World War II, sent in by Finland, or other. And Vietnam falls in other because, you know. Anyway, that is my video about Nagant revolvers. I will eventually do a disassembly video on this when I feel like being brave enough to try to brave that mainspring again. If I haven't told you before, the mainspring is a motherfucker. Oh boy. We'll talk about that when I get to that video. But until then, this is Sergey Mosin signing out.